My brother Dennis always said he was the practical one, the one who made the hard calls, the one who saw things clearly when emotions got in the way. So when he sat across from our 72-year-old mother at her own dinner table in her own house, eating her own food, and told her she was too old to manage a property like this, he genuinely believed he was being helpful. Mama just passed him the rolls, and I saw it. That look. Patience. The particular kind that only comes when you already know how the story ends. Let me tell you about Evelyn Rose Mathis. She bought that house in 1978, paid it off in 1999. Every repair, every upgrade, every coat of paint done on her terms, with her money, on her schedule. 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a garden in the back she tended like it was a living thing because to her, it was. She raised 3 children in that house. She buried a husband from that house. She woke up every morning for 46 years and made coffee in that kitchen and watched the sun come up over the same back fence. That house was not a property. That house was Evelyn. Dennis moved in 18 months ago. He called it temporary. Said his contracting business had hit a rough patch. Said he just needed a few months to stabilize. Mama said of course, because that's who she is. Within 6 weeks he'd repainted the guest room without asking. Within 3 months his wife Cheryl had rearranged the living room furniture. Within 6 months their teenage son Marcus had claimed the garden shed as a studio and run an extension cord through Mama's kitchen window. And Dennis started talking about the house like it was already his. When we eventually take this over, we should really update the electrical. It'll help with resale, Mama. Have you thought about what happens to this place when you're gone? She hadn't gone anywhere. She was standing right there. But Dennis had a habit of talking about people like they'd already left the room. The dinner that started everything happened on a Tuesday in February. Dennis had invited himself, Cheryl, Marcus, and this is important, a man named Gerald, who he introduced as a friend in real estate. Gerald brought a briefcase to a family dinner, to a house he had never been invited to. Mama made pot roast, set the table properly, lit the candles the way she always does. And halfway through the meal, Dennis cleared his throat and said, "Mama, Gerald's been looking at the property. We think it's time to talk about transferring the deed." Not asking. Talking about. Like it was already decided. Like Gerald in the briefcase and the Tuesday dinner were just the formal announcement of a conclusion they'd reached without her. "You're 72, Dennis said. This house is too much. You need to be somewhere manageable, somewhere safe. We can take it from here." Mama looked at Gerald. Then she looked at the briefcase. Then she looked at Dennis. And she said, "Would anyone like dessert?" Dennis laughed it off as her being overwhelmed. Told Gerald she'd come around. Told Cheryl she just needed time to process. He went to bed that night completely confident. He had no idea that while he was sleeping, Mama was making a phone call. If she made pot roast and lit the candles and then made the call that changed everything, subscribe and turn on that notification bell. We are going to where Evelyn Rose Mathis stops being polite. What Dennis didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Mama had already talked to a realtor 3 weeks before that dinner. Before Gerald and his briefcase ever walked through her door. She'd seen the signs, the furniture moving, the "when we take this over," the way Dennis looked at her walls like he was already measuring for something different. So she called Patricia Webb, a realtor she'd known since church in 1994, and she told her quietly, "I need to sell my house. Fast, clean, and I need it handled before my son figures out what's happening." Patricia, who had met Dennis once at a church picnic and found him unpleasant, said, "Evelyn, I have a couple already approved. Give me 2 weeks." Mama accepted an offer on a Thursday. Dennis had a showing with Gerald scheduled for the following Monday. She never mentioned it. She cooked. She gardened. She watched her shows. She let Dennis talk about electrical updates at dinner like a man renovating a house that had already been sold. Closing happened on a Friday morning while Dennis was at a contractor meeting across town. Mama signed the papers, shook Patricia's hand, and drove herself to the Cracker Barrel on Route 9 for a celebratory breakfast. Eggs over easy, extra biscuits, orange juice. She said it was the best meal she'd had in 18 months. The new owners, a young couple named the Abercrombies, were moving in that Sunday. Dennis found out Saturday night, not from Mama, from a moving company that knocked on the door to do a pre-move measurement walkthrough. Dennis opened the door in his pajamas and came to find Mama in the kitchen. "There are strangers at the door talking about measurements," he said. "Mm-hmm," she said. "Mama, what is going on?" What Dennis didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Mama had already talked to a realtor. 3 weeks before that dinner, she'd seen the signs. The way Dennis looked at her walls, like he was already measuring for something different. So she called Patricia Webb and told her quietly, "I need to sell my house. Fast, clean, and I need it handled before my son figures out what's happening." Patricia said, "Evelyn, I have a couple already approved. Give me 2 weeks." Mama accepted an offer on a Thursday. Closing happened on a Friday morning. Mama signed the papers and drove herself to the Cracker Barrel for a celebratory breakfast. She said it was the best meal she'd had in 18 months. The new owners were moving in that Sunday. Dennis found out Saturday night from a moving company that knocked on the door. He opened it in his pajamas and came to find Mama in the kitchen. "Mama, what is going on?" She turned from the stove, set down her spoon, and told him that she had sold the house, that closing was yesterday, and that a notarized 60-day notice for him, Cheryl, and Marcus was on the kitchen counter. Dennis stared at her. "You can't do this," he said. "This is my home." And Mama said, "No, baby, this was mine." The sale came out to just under $600,000. Mama had already put a deposit on a 2-bedroom condo and booked a 14-day Mediterranean cruise. She sent him a postcard from Barcelona. Dennis spent his 60 days angry. He questioned her mental competency, which her attorney, her doctor, and the notarized closing documents addressed swiftly. There was no manipulation. There was just a 72-year-old woman who had spent 46 years building something, and one son who spent 18 months assuming it was already his. Karma's list just makes sure the receipts are in order. Last I heard, Dennis is renting an apartment. Mama's tomatoes are already coming in at the new place. If Evelyn Rose Mathis just made your day, give this video a like. And drop in the comments if Dennis really thought he had her figured out. Subscribe, for Karma's list is just getting started.